And continued, just so, O Mahamati, the reality innerly attained by myself and the Tathagatas endures. It is the continuity of the Dharma, it is the fixedness of the Dharma, it is the so-ness, realness, and trueness, of things. There is a reality that endures, it is the realm beyond the ken of discrimination. It is the mind itself but freed from the entanglements of speculation and imagination. It reveals itself through our empirical consciousness when our empirical consciousness goes beyond itself, that is, when it transcends dualism. Dharmata or reality, then, is no other than the supreme wisdom. Alayavijnana, realized inwardly by and in oneself. When this realization comes to one, no proofs are now needed for the doctrine of mind only. As Zen declares, it is like drinking water yourself. You know without being told by others whether it is cold or warm. Some concluding remarks. Having enumerated these considerations in the Lankavatara that lead to the thought of the mind only, let us make this remark in the way of concluding this part of the present chapter. It is this. The Lankavatara was not written with the view of establishing a philosophical thesis to be called pure idealistic monism. Its central motive was to make us realize that enlightenment comes when we are detached from the tyranny of language and discrimination. When we enter into the realm of anusrava, when, going beyond all philosophical reasonings, we stand on the inner ground of consciousness and shine out in our own inner brightness. This being the case, as I have already remarked elsewhere, it would be unreasonable of us to expect anything systematically or logically thoroughgoing in the Lankavatara. Even when all the threads of logic are found in confusion, the Lankavatara will still insist on the doctrine of mind only, saying that it is a fact of immediate perception and that enlightenment or spiritual freedom comes upon one after realizing this fact within oneself. It will then be the business of the philosophers to logically demonstrate that fact and not to deny it or reject it. If we feel cold when it snows, the scientist will have to explain the fact and not reject it as being empirically impossible. The rejection or denial in such a case means intellectual suicide. It is evident that the mind regarded here as the unit of principle of experience is not our empirical mind. And, naturally, it is variously designated by the author of the Lankavatara as it is observed from various points of reference. Besides those already mentioned such as Paramartha, Para Fast Hiti Dharmata, Pratyatana Dharmata, Buddhata, etc. We give, below, some more synonyms and descriptive notions of the ultimate ground of existence. Point 1. Vikalpa Vivikta Dharma, truth that is detached from discrimination. 2. Pratyatmadagama Visesha Lakshata, an excellent state of consciousness attained inwardly by oneself. 3. Jnanmh Subham. Samudakara Varitam, pure knowledge possessed by the Tathagata, which is free from all consciousness of action. 4. Svavavam Eka Difomi Taka Vijapti Vajitam, I teach oneself nature that is beyond the ken of reasoning and representation. 5. Svayam Avadigata Yatha Tatya Vivikta Dharma, solitary truth of thusness realized by oneself. 6. Aya Jnana Svavava Vastu, the supreme wisdom constituting the ultimate fact of existence. 7. Tathagat Asvapratyatma Alayavijnana Adhigama, realization by the Tathagata of supreme wisdom in his own inmost consciousness. 8. Tattva, thatness, or Tathata or Tathatva, thusness or suchness. 9. Yathabhutarthastana, the view established on the truth of suchness. 10. Samyagna, right knowledge which is one of the 5 categories. 11. Nirabhasa Gokara, realm of no shadows. I cannot conclude this study without referring, though casually, to the difference between the doctrine of Cittamatra and that of Vijnaptimatra. The latter being the thesis of the Yogacara school of Buddhism, which was founded principally by Asanga and Vasubandhu. In 1925, Professor Sylvain Lévy published Stiramati's commentaries on the Vijnaptimatrata Siddhi by Vasubandhu, which were discovered by him in Nepal. And we have at present 2 Japanese translations of it. One by Dr. Junjiro Takakusu and the other by Dr. Unrei Wagihara. Besides these 2 most important texts of the Yogacara, Professor Lévy some time ago published another Yogacara text known as Sutra Lalikara with his French translation. This is ascribed to Asanga. Thus furnished with the principal textbooks of the Vijnanamatra doctrine of Mahayana Buddhism, scholars are now able to ask, how is the Cittamatra of the Lankavatara to be distinguished from the Vijnanamatra? Or are they the same, only differently designated? The following is given more to elucidate the Lankavatara position than to give a definite answer to the question. It is a most significant question deserving a fuller treatment than we may discuss here. Point 8. The doctrine persistently maintained in the Lankavatara is Cittamatra or Cittadrisyamatra, and not Vijnana or Vijnaptimatra, which, according to Asanga and Vasubandhu, is Adadi Sarva Vijaythya Pti Matrakam, meaning by idem that which is discriminated as, this is the self, and that is an external reality, that is, this world where the subject is distinguished from the object, or, to use Buddhist terminology, the triple world including both Saskrita and Asmitskrita. It is true that Chitta is quite frequently identified with Vijnana or Vijnapti as in the following Gatha, in which this identification is explicitly referred to. Mind, discrimination, representation, the will, consciousness, the storage, that which makes the triple world, all these are synonyms of mind. But when the word Cittamatra is used, this Chitta has a specific sense to be distinguished from the empirical mind which functions as Manas and Vijnana. As I have repeatedly remarked, the Chitta in the Lankavatara is the principle of mentality, and when it is said that there is the mind only, this mind includes not only the empirical mind but that which constitutes the very basis of discrimination. The mind is what is left behind when all forms of discrimination are rejected as leading to spiritual bondage and defilement. It is thus something that has been here even prior to all discrimination, that is, even before the duality of subject and object had come to exist. The Lankavatara does not advocate nihilism pure and simple. It tries to take hold of somewhat beyond this world of particularization. When one has actually taken hold of it by sheer act of intuition which is made possible by the working of non-discriminative wisdom, or supreme wisdom, or superior knowledge. In the inmost recesses of consciousness, the Lankavatara calls it the mind. And as there is nothing subjective or objective besides this mind, the Cittamatra or mind-only theory is now positively established. The philosophy, if there is any such thing in the Lankavatara, is ontology and not epistemology. Whereas the doctrine of Vijnaptimatra is epistemological. The Yogacara school is regarded as advocating indiscriminately the Vijnanamatra or the Vijnaptimatra, as if the 2 terms meant the same thing. Exactly stated, however, it seems to me that the Vijnaptimatra is not to be conference used with the Vijnanamatra. For, in the first place, the Trasika Vijnapti Karika, which is the main text of the school, written by Vasubandhu, speaks of Vijnaptimatra and not of Vijnanamatra. In the Chinese translation it is often used for both Vijnapti and Vijnana, which causes confusion. Both terms come from the same root jna, to know, and Vijnapti means, made known, indicated, named, represented. While Vijnana is, knowing, or, act of knowing, or knowledge. Thus Vijnapti is something marked, named, designated, represented, and one can most logically infer that, he who sees that all is name only, sees that all is Vijnaptimatra. In the Chinese Linkavatam, the word is rendered as talk. Indica. Thiện. Construction, from which we can see that the Vijnaptimatra is not the Vijnanamatra. So we have in the Trinsika, so long as the Vijnana does not abide in Vijnaptimatratva, there is no ceasing of the remorse which arises from the twofold grasping. Again, his mind abides in names because he then sees that all is name only. And as he abides in names, what is attained by means of representations is cut off. Then he reaches the realm where there is no attainment as he goes on in his reflection. When he is thus liberated from all his hindrances, he attains supreme sovereignty. The main contention of the Vijnaptimatra theory is that all that is thought of as reality, as having self-substance, is no more than name. That names are our own subjective creations and have no corresponding realities. That because we have so particularized and so named, or so indicated, or so labeled, or so made known, we see all these particularized individual objects, mental as well as physical. And yet we fail to realize this, imagining all the time that the world of particulars is final reality and worth while getting attached to and made the object of desperate longing. Verse 28 of the Trinsika, therefore, declares that, when the Vijnana takes no hold on an objective world it abides in the Vijnaptimatratva, for when there is nothing to be grasped, there is no grasping. This is the gist of the theory of Vijnaptimatra as presented by Asanga and Vasubandhu. In the Lankavatara no reference is made to the Vijnapti except probably once, but rather to the Prajnaptimatra view of the world. And even in the latter case the reference is negligible. Considering that the weight of the whole discourse in the Lankavatara falls on the Cittamatra and not on the Pranaptimatra or Vijnaptimatra or Namamatra or Vikalpa matra. The sutra does not linger long on the question of the world being merely a name or a representation. But it exhausts its powers of persuasion to convince the reader that the world is mind itself. And that it is only by realizing this truth in one's own inner consciousness that enlightenment ensues. The transcendental mind, or mind itself, or mind only is thus made the chief subject of the text. In this it varies from the teaching of the Yogacara. The latter emphasizes the process of transformation which takes place in the Alayavijnana, and it naturally makes most of the aspect of existence which is to be considered merely ideational. It does not go further on to say that there is the mind only as the principle of unification in which all representations, cogitations, discriminations, and a world of particulars, leave no traces. According to Cittamati's commentary, the Trinisika is regarded as written for those who do not understand truthfully what is meant by Cittamatra, but this does not mean that the Cittamatra is the Vijnaptimatra. The former may be based on the latter, or we can say that when the Cittamatra is declared as a fact of intuitive knowledge, the doctrine of Vijnaptimatra logically follows from this realization. The Trisika may thus form a part of the Lankavatara's philosophical foundation. But we must not overlook the fact that there is a conceptual difference between the theme of the Lankavatara and the Yogacara, psychological or rather epistemological interpretation of existence. The natural course of procedure here on the part of the writer would be now to write about the relation between the Lankavatara and the awakening of faith in the Mahayana, which is usually ascribed to Asvaghosha, as the latter almost seems an attempt at systematizing the philosophy of the Lankavatara. But as the writer expects to publish a second revised English translation of this most important Mahayana textbook, he passes by the opportunity of touching upon the subject in this chapter.